London Market Forums, bringing insurance professionals together.
The growth of widely distributed big IT systems that go outside normalized organizations. So I started back in the day studying here. I'm one of the only people at the LSE who's got a membership of CERN. I studied particle physicists at the Large Hadron Collider. Why? Because they built a network of 600 data centers connected together to produce to do the analysis of the data coming from the Large Hadron Collider. And I was interested in how do you build those systems at scale? And then that got me interested in lots of things around cloud, and I wrote a book on cloud. I'll mention that because I'm going to name drop. You can buy it in all good secondhand bookshops and bargain basements for about a penny. But anyway, I'll talk about that. But what I want to do is try to give you a flavor of this idea that I'm getting onto now, which is how do we build systems that are plugging together? So we talked a lot about AI, and I'm researching around AI, but if you think about AI, we often talk about it as though it's a product, as though it's a thing that we put in the middle and we kind of use it, rather than seeing it as a glue that is connecting together data sources which may extend from outside the organization. And that's what I really want to focus on. I want to say, instead of looking at IT as a product, as a thing, like we were used to, you bought a computer. Nobody talks about computers anymore. They talk about services. They talk about devices. They talk about all these terms. Nobody talks about software anymore because the idea of packaged software doesn't really exist. We talk about cloud services, and therefore something's changed, and I'm going to try to address that. I also have a very large research project on this with these partners on the right, commercial partners, and these academic colleagues, particularly at UCL on the left, where we are studying this at scale. So we are looking at large-scale systems and around AI and machine learning at scale in these large organizations. Well, I want to take you back. To start this story, I want to take you back to 2011, and many of you here will remember the Student Riots. Okay. So the police here are attempting to control a load of, not LSE students, other students. They're trying to control a load of students who are causing havoc. And the standard response to that is with huge amounts of infrastructure, huge amounts of technology. They have helicopters whirring about. They have people on step ladders with big cameras to see what's going on. They have radios, millions and millions of pounds worth of radio equipment. They have control rooms. They have maps. They have everything available. Plus, they have all of that available to them as a coordinated unit. They are a proper organization that runs like a proper organization. And their way to control this is a thing called kettling. Yeah? So what you do, if people know this, you surround the riot. You push them in, as these police are doing here. You try to create a cordon around them and lock the protesters in, and then you just hold them there till they are so desperate to go to the toilet that they can't throw anything because they've got to keep their hands. They are just desperate to get home. And that's the standard response to riot. It's safe for all parties. It's considered the standard response. And it didn't work. Despite the millions of pounds of stuff, it clearly demonstrably didn't work. Well, one of the reasons, and we can debate this, but The Economist and Wired and various other people described it at the time, was the invention of this thing. This thing was called Suki, because there was a nursery rhyme that my daughter knows. Polly puts the kettle on, that's the police. Suki takes the kettling off, right? Suki took the kettling off because 3 students at UCL hacked together in about an hour and a half a Google map. Twitter feeds would say where the position of the police are. The Google map would automatically display the coordinate locations of where the police are on a map, which allowed people in the riot to say, don't go that way, the police are coming this way. It didn't need everybody to have access. It just needed 1 in 100 to have access to a service that gave them the information to completely destroy the ability to produce a kettling response to that riot. Arguably, that's what The Economist said. Fleeing riot police on foot, there's an app for that. Now, that's just one example, okay? Now take that example and imagine that that's 3 guys inside your organization hacking together using freely available services or using low-code solutions, of which there's some fantastic examples. It may be brilliant. It may transform your organization in a positive way. It may transform it in a negative way. But what it will do is transform the organization. And this is about very simple tools having a massive disruption. Now, that's an organization as kind of the police. It's a big organization. I want to talk to you today about how do we respond to that? How do we think about that idea of transformation as extended beyond the enterprise, just as those 3 students were brought into the police's response to riot, arguably negatively. Okay. So first of all, everyone mentions Moore's law, right? You've probably sat here. People have talked about Moore's law. I'm not an economist. I work at the LSE, but I'm not an economist. But I do know some basic economics. And one of the things I know is that demand meets supply. And therefore, when everyone talks about Moore's law, they're talking about a collapse in the price of the supply. This is very nicely described in prediction machines about AI and the possibilities there, the economics of AI. But they're talking about collapse in the price of processing and storage of data. And that is met by demand for that massive increase in capacity. So when people show you slides like this, and we all laugh at them, right? $3,000 for a 10 megabyte thing. I mean, you've seen these before. Think about it as 10 megabytes was worth to that organization at that time in the 1980s, the equivalent of about $20,000 today. Because data wasn't available, because this met demand, right? This met demand, otherwise it wouldn't have worked. Today, this thing exists. Has anyone seen? This is a container. Okay, obviously it's not very interesting, but it's actually Amazon Snowmobile. This is the largest USB stick on the planet. This thing contains 0.1 exabytes, and Amazon can deliver 10 of them to your data center if you want them in the next few weeks. This thing comes and sucks that quantity of data out of data centers. Now, I put it up not in terms of supply, as in Amazon, isn't it amazing Amazon have this thing, but think about it in terms of demand. People wanted this. Economically, it's worth Amazon supplying an ability to deliver 0.1 exabytes of data into the Amazon cloud. So we're talking about companies wanting vast quantities of data moved into these spaces. And what are the consequences of that? So I want to talk a little bit more about this. And we all have seen these type of things. So this was an Economist article a couple of years ago talking about oil. You know, data is the new oil. Has everybody heard that phrase? Data's the new oil. And we had this coming out of this big data, the data revolution. This is a great, more academic book. And then on the counter side, Shoshana Zuboff, who we at the LSE know very well, has just written this Age of Surveillance Capitalism, it's a big tome, talking about the challenges of large-scale data and harnessing data about individuals in terms of changing the nature of society. So there's something going on here. Collapse in the price of processing, which people have talked about in terms of AI possibilities, availability of data, availability of all of these services, and then this idea of this cloud stuff. And I want to bring those together, if I can get the clicker to work. Where am I? Could I just, yeah, that's the next slide. So I wrote this book with a couple of colleagues at the LSE. It's got a terrible title, probably why it's available for pennies in second-hand bookshops. But the title was trying to reflect the idea that for me, when we talk about cloud computing, it wasn't the cloud as the internet, right? Everybody talked about the cloud as though it was the internet. For me, it was about a clouding and making more amorphous the edge of the organization, the boundary of the organization. The organization became cloud-like. You are here today able to access from this hotel services in the cloud from your organization. Now, that data isn't going to your organizations. It's going through this Wi-Fi network, probably to Salesforce or to Oracle's cloud or to an Amazon cloud. The edge of the organization has changed. Where we are, we used to have these laptops that were completely locked down and you could only connect to the corporate network and you couldn't get anything else. That boundary has blurred. But also the strategy, we are now harnessing, say we harness Salesforce. Salesforce changes its software or its service regularly. the CEO of the organization can't at that point easily necessarily say, I don't like this, I want to stick with the old version. We're dragged along. So the edge of our organization, the strategy of our organization gets pulled along with this cloud change. Sorry, can I have the next slide? Can I just ask for the next slide? So what I think is the organization is a bit like, as Brian Arthur talked about in a McKinsey article, it's a bit like the aspen trees. So what we've created is a digital economy that looks like we've got lots of organizations, because we still have brands, right?